So I wish to mention to you that when we started on the 25th of May 2017, um, I had announced that each year we would have a new chaplain serving this honorable house. And so this morning, I want to thank Pastor Genius Wells, senior pastor on Chapel of the Hill, for his service to this honorable house for the past year. I am indeed very appreciative of his words of wisdom and his calming spirit each morning before we begin our proceedings. No matter what the circumstance, he always had a word of encouragement and a word of peace. And the chair really appreciates it. Thank you very much, Reverend Wells. And this morning, I wish to introduce to you our chaplain for the next 12 months in the person of Reverend Angela Bosfield Palacios. Reverend Palacios, of course, all of the Bahamas would be aware, was the first female to be ordained in the Anglican diocese as a deacon and as priest. I think in 1999, the first ordination, and as priest in the year 2000. Reverend Palacios is also an author and has been doing meditations, writings in the newspapers for more than 30 years now. And no doubt that her angelic voice in this chamber would be ordained of God. And we look forward to a really spiritual relationship over the next 12 months. Reverend Palacios.
Let us listen to a story found in Esther chapter 4. Haman has tricked the king into signing an edict to destroy the Jews, and his wife Esther and her uncle Mordecai are both Jews. And I quote now from Esther chapter 4, verses 13 and 14. Word has gone to Esther that she is to intervene with her husband, the king, even though she has not been called into his presence. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai that she had not had permission, he sent back this answer: "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's families will perish. And who knows but that you have come to royal position for such a time as this." The word of the Lord. Let us reflect this morning on the concept of time. God's time to bring relief and deliverance for our people. These are the best of times for many of us. Education is available, healthcare is accessible, opportunities are in abundance. We have a goodly heritage. We enjoy many privileges, and in some respects, we are the envy of the world. The beauty of our country is breathtaking, even from outer space. These are also challenging times. For too many of our people, these are stressful days. Money is short. Bills are due. Their health is compromised. Relationships are strained and even violent. And God may seem very far away. My sisters and brothers, we have been called to serve in our various capacities for such a time as this. Our life experiences, our education, our exposure abroad, our times of revelation as a result of meditation, these have all brought us to this place for this time. May we be found faithful in our generation. May we be historically relevant in the contribution that we are making. May we be inspired to believe that God's anointing is upon us, and we are being equipped to help usher in God's kingdom here on earth. May truth, justice, love, and peace be your gifts to receive and to share. May integrity be the stamp of your character and the legacy that you leave behind. And even as you recall days that you have come to leadership for such a time as this, let us pray. Lord our God, we, your children, recognize that without you we are nothing. But with you, we can achieve impossible things. Empower us to be godly leaders. Remind us to be humble followers. Bless us to make wise decisions and influence our people for good. Let love overflow in our hearts, even as we now pray together our family prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Turngrass, Brent Simonette, Desmond Bannister, Glenn McGrath, Jeffrey Lloyd, Dr. Duane Sands, Marvin Day, Francis Campbell, Dionisio Diagula, Michael Princhard, Darren Henfield, Ramal Ferreira, Renita Ray, Renzo Ray, Ellsworth Johnson, Philip Davis, Vaughn Miller, Patricia Pastor Edson, Aaron Lewis, Carlton Gomez, James Audrey, Travis Robinson, Adrian Gibson, Donald Sanders, Frederick McAlpine, Hank Johnson, Mark Hume, Michael Folk, Miriam Wesley Emmanuel, Reese Shipman, Ruben Manning, Ricky Mackey, Shannon Cartwright, Donnell Ferguson, Leonard Hannah Martin, Tyso Forbes, Chester Cooper. Good morning.
Morning, honorable members. There's no communication by the Speaker. Introduction and swearing in of new members. Laying of documents by ministers. Statements and communications by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to report to this honorable House on my attendance at that of the Bahamas delegation, the 73rd regular session of the United Nations General Assembly. I also attended a number of other meetings in my capacity as head of government. The Speaker, the 73rd regular session of the United Nations General Assembly convened on 18th September 2018. The general debate, which brings together world leaders at the United Nations headquarters in New York City convened on the 25th of September 2018. The theme for the general debate was making the United Nations relevant to all people. Global leadership and shared responsibilities for peaceful, equitable, and sustainable societies. The agenda, Mr. Speaker, is attached at Annex 1, which should be provided to this Parliament. The Bahamas delegation departed Nassau on the 23rd of September and returned on the 29th of September 2018. That delegation list, Mr. Speaker, is also attached at Annex 2, which would likewise be provided here. I presented the Bahamas National Statement to the General Assembly on the 28th of September. A copy of the address is likewise attached at Annex 3. A primary theme of my national statement was the grave threat of climate change to the livelihoods of the Bahamian people and to the long-term economic, social, and political sustainability of the Bahamas. I noted, Mr. Speaker, that if the United Nations is to remain relevant, it must address in a meaningful way international behavior leading to climate change. I further noted the need to build resilience and capacity in countries most affected by climate change, especially small island developing states. And moreover, I reiterated our standing position that the vulnerabilities associated with an archipelago such as ours needs to be taken into account when assessing for international assistance and grants. I propose a solution, Mr. Speaker, that the financial model of the future allow borrowing post-natural disaster that does not affect the debt-to-GDP ratio of countries such as ours. This would minimize risk of rating downgrades. The United Nations Secretary General will call a climate summit next September where some of these issues will be addressed. And Mr. Speaker, several high-level meetings were held in association with the General Assembly. My full schedule is attached at Annex 4. Along with other leaders, I was invited to address the Nelson Mandela Peace Summit. A copy of the address is attached at Annex 5. This was a high-level plenary meeting on global peace in honor of the centenary of the birth of Nelson Mandela. I recounted the pivotal role the Bahamas played in the 8th Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting held here in the Bahamas, led by former Prime Minister Sir Lyndon Tinling. This meeting produced the Agreement on South Africa, also known as the Nassau Accord, which pressed the then government of South Africa to enter into negotiations with the black majority to end apartheid. I was also invited to participate in a roundtable discussion in the Bloomberg Global Business Forum held on 24th of September. The roundtable discussion focused on building resilient economies and preserving marine ecosystems in coastal Commonwealth nations. Emphasis was placed on funding methodologies to aid in building resilience. My attendance at the Bloomberg Global Business Forum also afforded me the opportunity to meet and interact with the world's business leaders. During this forum, we discussed a number of issues which I anticipate will lead to a number of economic benefits for the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, I should also mention that I had the opportunity to meet the CEO of Airbnb, at which time I discussed the challenges and the problems we face with second homeowners and rental facilities, Family Islands, and throughout the Bahamas. And he's agreed that if the Bahamas were to institute any form of taxation for such facilities, Airbnb would keep a register of all facilities within the Bahamas who has applied through their organization, and they would deduct the relevant tax and have it repatriated to the Bahamas government. There were two health-related high-level meetings, Mr. Speaker, one on the fight against tuberculosis, and the second on non-communicable diseases, held on the 26th and 27th of September 2018, respectively. Due to conflicts in my schedule, Member of Parliament for St. Barnabas, the Honorable Shenandoah Cartwright, participated on my behalf and gave remarks with regards to NCD. And those remarks, Mr. Speaker, are attached as Annex 6. I want to mention that moving forward, Mr. Speaker, as I am a strong believer of succession planning, it is my intention that all international meetings that I attend in the future, moving forward, be it CARICOM, Commonwealth, a member of Parliament, backbencher, will accompany me at each respective meeting. And therefore, I want the papers, the Bahamian people, Travis and all to hear that a member of Parliament accompanying me is not wasting the Bahamian people's money. It's preparing them and the Bahamas for the future. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the meetings which I have just outlined, there were other meetings which required the attendance of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, officials of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the permanent mission of the Bahamas to the United Nations, the Minister of Transport and Local Government, and the Minister of State in the Office of the Prime Minister in Grand Bahama. The schedule of the Minister of Foreign Affairs is attached at Annex 7. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas has one of the world's fastest growing ship registries with more than 1,570 ships, vessels, placing the Bahamas within the top 10 of the world's flag states. The Bahamas is a member of the International Maritime Organization and is a member of the Council of the International Maritime Organization, Category C, for which we are seeking re-election. I want to also mention, Mr. Speaker, that in November of this year, my Minister with responsibility for marine will be traveling with members of the Maritime Authority to open a new office in Tokyo, and this is to assist in expanding our ship register. They are also in discussion with expanding and looking at the Koreas so as to penetrate the Asian market. The Bahamas Maritime Authority hosted several events and participated in bilateral meetings with other countries to promote our maritime interests and our re-election bid. My remarks on the occasion of the BMA's and industry reception are attached as Annex 8. The presence of the Minister of Transport was important in achieving these objectives. Mr. Speaker, I also felt it very important to utilize this occasion to engage in investment promotion, with particular regard to interest expressed in Grand Bahama in the technology sector. We continue to promote Grand Bahama as a technology hub. I am pleased to say that the Minister of State, Senator the Honorable Kwesi Thompson, hosted several important meetings and made meaningful contacts which will be pursued in the weeks to come. Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank the permanent representatives of the Bahamas to the United Nations, Sheila Carey, and the competent staff of the Bahamas mission to the United Nations for the tremendous work they do on behalf of our country and for the arrangements made for the Bahamas delegation. I thank the chair of the board of Bahamas Maritime Authority, Mrs. Denise Lewis Johnson, and the Bahamas Maritime Authority deputy chair, Mr. Peter Galandros, as well as Captain Hutchinson and the staff of the Bahamas Maritime Authority for their important work and for the success of the various meetings in New York. Let me also relay my gratitude to all of the members of the Bahamas delegation who acquitted themselves well and who represented our Bahamas with distinction. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order that the documents be brought up. Order that the documents do lie on the table. Further statements and communications by ministers. Communications by the clerk. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the Senate. Motion for leave of absence, leave to resign seat, and new writ. Presentation of petitions. Presentation of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills. Second reading and committal of bills. Committee of the whole House. Third reading and passing of bills. Consideration of Senate's amendments. Resolutions. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marathon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, before I proceed with the formal matter at hand, which is to present to this honorable House and its members the resolution on behalf of the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation. Mr. Speaker, first, I would like to thank the residents of the Marathon constituency who have put me in this position, which is to serve them. Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate all of the residents who came out over the past few weeks, the ones from John Ottridge Estates, the ones from Ideal Estates, the ones along Abundant Life Road and Old Trail Cemetery Road, for the cleanups that have been ongoing for the past 3 weeks and the contributions they've made. I'd like to also thank the hardworking staff at the Ministry of Environment and Housing, particularly Department of Environmental Health Services, for their assistance, and the members of the Beaches and Parks team, led by the honorable member from St. Barnabas. It was truly a team effort. I want to thank them. We will continue and press on. And I want to foreshadow that on the 15th of October, although I am always very cautious in issuing these dates as I receive them, so let's just say by the second week in October, we shall commence a second and more aggressive and intensive public awareness campaign in relation to keeping our Bahamas clean, green, and pristine, and encouraging Bahamians to be heroes. I also, because in Marathon we are a family, I think our constituency has endured more than most. I'm sure the Bahamian public is aware of the antecedents. I won't remind them at this time, but at the appropriate time I surely will remind them. But I'd like to extend birthday greetings to Marcian Sims, Carrington Thompson, Kendria Campbell. You know, anytime I hear the Campbell name, I am always reminded of my own family from Arthurstown, Cat Island. Lania Taylor, Cherie Musgrove, Wendy Orlando, Miriam Johnson, Darcy Ellis, and Chantel Augustine Pinder. Happy birthday to all of you. May God continue to shower his rich blessings upon you, and may you live a life worthy of fulfillment and content, and all your dreams and hopes and aspirations come true. I learned that from South Andres there. South Andres reminded me of that. My guild president, Mr. South Andres. But Mr. Speaker, see, I can't even get him to crack a smile. He has on his Clint Eastwood face today. I don't know what's coming yet, but whatever is coming, I'm ready. I can assure you. Mr. Speaker, I now with your leave, I move to read the resolution. Whereas the Treasurer of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the Treasurer, a corporation sole, established under Section 4, Subsection 1 of the Ministry of Finance Act, Chapter 23, Statute Laws of the Bahamas, the Act, is seized in fee simple and trust for Her Majesty in right of her government of the said Commonwealth for public purposes of the hereditaments described in the schedule hereto, the hereditaments, and whereas the Treasurer has agreed, and the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, a body corporate established under Section 3 of the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation Act, Chapter 254, Statute Laws of the Bahamas, the purchaser has agreed to buy the hereditaments, namely A, B, E, and F, hereinafter described in the schedule hereto, for an estate in fee simple, in possession for the nominal fee of $10 in the currency of the Commonwealth, the currency. And whereas, by Section 5, Subsection 3A of the Act, the Treasurer shall not sell or make any other dispositions of the fee simple of any land vested in her without the prior approval of both Houses of Parliament, signified by resolution thereof. Now, therefore, be it resolved that pursuant to Section 5, Subsection 3A of the Act, this House approves the conveyance by the Treasurer to the purchaser of the hereditaments for the nominal sum of $10 in the currency. All those, the schedule hereinbefore referred to, all those certain pieces or parcels of land containing by ad measurement 291 hundredths, 2.91 acres or thereabouts, being the parcels lettered A, B, E, and F, as shown on a plan on record in the Department of Lands and Survey, situate approximately 630 feet west of East Street and south of East Hill Street in the island of New Providence in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Parcel A, 1.3 acres. Abutting and bounding towards the north by East Hill Street, towards the east on property of the Government of the Bahamas, towards the south on Parcel B, towards the west on a 30-foot wide reservation. Parcel B, 0.63 acres. Abutting and bounding towards the north on Parcel A, towards the east on property of the Government of the Bahamas, towards the south on Parcel C, towards the west on a 30-foot wide road reservation. Parcel E, 0.45 acre. Abutting and bounding towards the north on a 30-foot wide road reservation, towards the east on Parcel F, towards the south on property now or formerly the Incorporated Trustee of the Church of England in the Bahamas, towards the west, partly on property now or formerly Jacques Berthier, and partly on property now or formerly the Nassau Lawn Tennis Club. Parcel F, 0.45 acre, abutting and bounding towards the south on a 30-foot wide road reservation, towards the east on a 30-foot wide road reservation, towards the south. That would have been, let me read that again, because I said south twice. Abutting and bounding towards the north on a 30 feet wide road reservation, towards the east on a 30 feet wide road reservation, towards the south on property now or formerly the Incorporated Trustee of the Church of England in the Bahamas, and towards the west on Parcel E. And for the record, there is a plan attached to the resolution, Mr. Speaker, and I formally read that into the minutes of the House. Mr. Speaker, I now bring a few brief remarks in relation to this matter and in celebration of this event. Mr. Speaker, again, it gives me great pleasure to stand before you as a representative of the constituency of Marathon, our community that is vibrant and continues to progress and grow from strength to strength and continues to be resilient despite what hardships are thrown at it, and unite as one was a common goal, which is a better Bahamas, a better community, as we make for a better home for us all. Mr. Speaker, Alexei Giannoulias once said that one of the biggest problems out there that I hear from my friends in the business community is that there is no lending, that it's tough to get a loan today. Yes, Mr. Speaker, that is true, and this is why the government decided to establish the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation in 1981. On the 10th of October 1983, the corporation opened its doors to the Bahamian public to stimulate, encourage, and promote ownership by making funds available to its citizens. Since 1998, the corporation has operated from the Russell Road location in Oaksfield. And for those of you who don't know, that's kind of like opposite McDonald's in Oaksfield. Fast forward, Mr. Speaker, 30 years later, the corporation has outgrown this space, Mr. Speaker. In terms of, from their perspective, what was once a new spacious building is now cramped and small because of the staff complement and because of the workload that they have. Space has become a huge challenge. It has impacted the operation of the corporation and its ability to serve its clients and the public at large, and also the employees of the corporation, to have them work in a space that is comfortable, safe, clean, and befitting of the highest state and caliber of service that they wish to deliver to the Bahamian people. Consequently, Mr. Speaker, the management of BMC began searching for better accommodations to house their services. In 2016, the management expressed an interest in acquiring the historic building on East Hill Street, formerly known as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs building, as its new home, and submitted a request to the Ministry of the Environment and Housing. Cabinet then approved the building to be acquired and housed by the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation at its 12th meeting in 2017. Soon thereafter, a resolution was prepared and the Treasurer was authorized to sell the former Ministry of Foreign Affairs building on East Hill Street to the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation. Mr. Speaker, in summary, the resolution serves to inform the Houses of Parliament and that the Treasurer has agreed to sell 4 parcels of land totaling 2.91 acres, which is known as parcels A, B, E, and F. These 4 parcels encompass some 630 feet of land west of East Street, south of East Hill Street on the island of New Providence. Mr. Speaker, Parcel A, which I described in the opening when I read the resolution, consists of 1.3 acres. Parcel B consists of 0.63 acres. Parcel E consists of 0.45 of an acre. Parcel F consists of 0.45 of an acre. Mr. Speaker, I believe you are very familiar with the location of this building, as it's the former site of the historic East Hill Club before becoming the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This 200-year-old building and grounds are now currently being refurbished by the corporation to their former magnificence and glory, paying careful attention to the restoration of the historic features. The renovation and retrofit and extension works to the main building and outer buildings and gardens are being funded entirely by the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation without any requirement for any subvention from the Bahamas government to the tune of $5 million, Mr. Speaker. The current upgrade follows and in some instances exceeds the standard of our present building code. It provides handicap accessibility throughout the entire building. Once completed, the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation will cease and desist from occupying the rental space and move to occupying its own accommodations, they themselves living the dream of home ownership. Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to say now, on this auspicious occasion, that as we prepare to celebrate the 35th anniversary of the establishment of the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, which will be fully celebrated next week, Wednesday, on the 10th of October 2018, how fitting it is that the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation should receive such a purchase at this time as it matures into a well-established, well-respected, and well-run financial institution and lending agency. Mr. Speaker, the BMC is also an approved lender authorized to make government-insured loans under the Housing Act 1967. It provides private mortgage loans to persons who wish to purchase vacant land, construct a new home, purchase a new or existing home, and repair or expand a current residence. Just like all other lending institutions, the BMC focuses on attracting and maintaining new mortgage loans. The ability to maintain these loans, Mr. Speaker, contributes to the growth and stability of the corporation. During the 2017-2018 fiscal period, the BMC had a total of 108 loans in their portfolio valued at $15.4 million. 32 of these loans were government-initiated loans valued at $5.2 million, and 76 were private mortgages valued at $10.2 million. Mr. Speaker, BMC is on a course to exercise prudent fiscal management aimed at improving BMC's financial position. Consequently, special attention has been given to the following. 1, the management and control of fiscal operations, activities, and expenses. 2, the improvement of the ability to service the interest and principal payments to the bondholders. And 3, to allocate funds to finance new mortgage loans. Just like all other financial lending institutions, the BMC aims to reduce the amount of bad loans in its books. When a borrower becomes delinquent in mortgage payments, Mr. Speaker, the BMC, first pursuant to the Homeowners Act 2017, serves a demand letter firmly requesting payment of the arrears within 30 days and inviting the individual to come and speak with them, to talk with them, to come to an arrangement with them where they could service their debt, Mr. Speaker. If there's no response, Mr. Speaker, within 6 months, documents are prepared and a writ is served on the client to pay monies owed to BMC. What happens then, Mr. Speaker, is that when the BMC is waiting for court rulings or court dates, we're actively reaching out to these individuals to come and talk to the BMC again, to speak with us. Most of them don't, Mr. Speaker. The fact of the matter is, from start to finish of this process, Mr. Speaker, it varies between a year to 2 years for the initiation of the letter and the commencement of court proceedings. More than sufficient time for persons to come in to the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, come to an arrangement. Mr. Speaker, recently the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation executed a number of these vacate orders. And before I elaborate any further, let me advise that the BMC serves its orders as required by law. Orders have to be served personally or by way of substituted service, which would either be in the newspaper or would be at the address listed in your application. Oftentimes, Mr. Speaker, the persons are called in to open up negotiation talks to devise more manageable payments. But many of the clients refuse to do so. So when the vacate orders are issued, it's always with ample notice, Mr. Speaker. And you know what's interesting, Mr. Speaker? Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, more than any other lending institution in this country, any other financial institution in this country, bends over backwards to accommodate its borrowers and shows more flexibility on extenuating services, extenuating circumstances, and offers more time and more generous timeline than any other financial institution, even the one that the member for Exuma and Ragged Island is closely affiliated with. But I'm sure I'm going to hear from him later on. I look forward to it. Mr. Speaker, I would now wish to highlight some of the interesting cases that plague the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation and have brought matters to this point. Mr. Speaker, I describe this as case one, and this is a small sample of what the employees of the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation are faced with on a daily basis. The client was granted a mortgage in October 2007 for $86,617. Today, the mortgage is past due. Notably, Mr. Speaker, during the process of foreclosure, it was discovered that the client had a deduction from another bank, another local bank, in the amount of $950, yet the client refused to have a deduction made to the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation. As a result of the client's financial situation, a deduction could then not further be made because they had committed the $960 on a consumer loan after they entered into the mortgage arrangement, Mr. Speaker. The client was granted 90 days to vacate and then also received an extra 30-day extension. Meanwhile, while this is going on, as usual, the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation is paying homeowner insurance, Mr. Speaker. Here's another case, Mr. Speaker. Another client was granted a mortgage in December 2009 for $98,888. Today, the client is past due by $86,286.87. It should be noted that the client never contributed a payment on the loan, Mr. Speaker, and when it was recommended that the client implement a salary deduction, the client refused to comply. Foreclosure proceedings started on September 2015, and the client received the eviction notice in October 2017, 2 years later, Mr. Speaker. In another instance, Mr. Speaker, the client was granted a mortgage in June 2003 for $84,008. Today, the client is past due $83,872.67. Foreclosure proceedings started in December 2015, and the vacant order was granted in August 2016. The order stipulated that BMC work along with the customer. Interesting, Mr. Speaker, the client blatantly never paid a penny since then. The client was signed, the writ was signed, to vacate the home in May 2018, another year. And of course, BMC continues to pay the homeowner insurance. In another instance, Mr. Speaker, client is granted a mortgage in May 2003, $78,837. Client is past due $76,965.22. Foreclosure proceedings commenced on April 2012, and a vacate order was granted on December 2015. Customer was given 4 months to vacate from 2015 and additional time, and refuses to pay anything towards the mortgage. Mr. Speaker, this is a small sample, but they all read the same. And it speaks of the reticence of some borrowers who refuse to pay their mortgage. I'd like to remind the public that the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation has a $4.2 million bond interest payment that they must service in order to meet their obligations. They must adhere to the 10 financial commandments and deal with all scenarios that will prevent them from achieving their goals. Mr. Michael Barry once said that one of the risks for anyone in the lending business is that being conservative can harm your competitiveness. Therefore, if the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation is to survive, it must deal with its bad loans and bad mortgages. Mr. Speaker, I now turn my attention back to the reason for my standing here in this honorable House this morning. I move that it be resolved that pursuant to Section 53A of the Ministry of Finance Act, Chapter 23, Statute Laws of the Bahamas, the House of Assembly approves the conveyances by the Treasurer for those parcels of land on East Hill Street, formerly known as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Building, to the purchaser, the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, for the nominal sum of $10. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's a privilege to rise in this place on behalf of the good people of Elizabeth. And I would like to bring to your attention
some words from two luminaries. The first is an American, George Santayana, who was born in 1863 and died in 1952. He was a philosopher, he was an essayist, he was a poet. Mr. Speaker, at some point in time, though, he left the United States and went back to his home in Spain. But he is most often remembered for these words: "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." Mr. Speaker, I'd like to now turn my attention to a local philosopher and scholar. The Deputy Speaker of the House followed this gentleman, Mr. Leslie Miller, and I believe that he spoke volumes when he said, albeit about a different group of people, but he said, "Never in the history of the Bahamas have so few screwed up so much for so many so quickly." And he was talking, I believe, about the administration opposite. Mr. Speaker, today is a wonderful day in the history of the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation. With a $5 million construction cost, they will complete a journey which started in 2004. In 2004, the then administration signed a contract with Holiday Industrial Builders to build a building on John F. Kennedy Drive. That building took a long time to build, and it ended up costing the Bahamian people $32 million. The builder ultimately went into arbitration with the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, who owned the building in the beginning. That's where the Mortgage Corporation was supposed to go. The building was eventually sold to NIB. Back and forth, back and forth. The people that got the short end of the stick, however, Mr. Speaker, were the taxpayers of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Marathon, the honorable member for Marathon would have given a brief history of the Mortgage Corporation. I have said repeatedly in this honorable place about a time when the side opposite was progressive and liberal. I will say it again. The Bahamas Mortgage Corporation was established by an act of Parliament in 1983. The first Minister of Housing, I believe, was the Right Honorable Hubert Alexander Ingram. And one of the first housing projects created was Elizabeth Estates. The purpose of the Mortgage Corporation was to facilitate the construction of a new home, the purchase of new or existing single or multi-family structures, the purchase of vacant land, or the rehabilitation or renovation of homes. Now, the Mortgage Corporation grew from just a Nassau presence to a presence in Abaco and Grand Bahama. But very quickly after its founding, the Mortgage Corporation took a turn for the worse. So by 2010, Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation had a total of 3,119 loans on its portfolio, for a total book value of just under $180 million. However, 40% of those loans were delinquent. 40%. When I say delinquent, meaning more than 90 days. This was 2010. By 2017, the delinquency rate was 42%. Just to give you an idea, in 1991, the delinquency rate was 15.75%. 1997, 29%. 2002, 33%. 2007, 25%. 2010, 41%. 2017, 42%. Now, there have been upward spikes in delinquency, typically due to certain international periods. One was the economic recessions associated with the 1990s Gulf War, and then the economic downturn of 2008, 2009. And there were some decisions made to exercise leniency during those periods that had a devastating effect on the loan portfolio of the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation. Now, typically, the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation has financed its low-cost housing program with the issuance of bonds. The Bahamas Mortgage Corporation issued bonds held by a number of local financial institutions. But the biggest holder of BMC bonds is the National Insurance Board. As a matter of fact, the NIB holds the lion's share of roughly $170 million worth of bonds outstanding in 2010. There has been a sinking fund created. A sinking fund is a financial instrument used to prepare to defray large anticipated expenses. And so if the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation has $160 million worth of bonds and has to pay interest and then has to redeem the bond, then the expectation is that you would have cash or BGRS investments at a certain percentage of the bonds issued. Now, historically, there have been times when the sinking fund has been undercapitalized. There were other times when the sinking fund was better capitalized. It is interesting to note, Mr. Speaker, that certainly during the period 2002 to 2007, that the deficit in the bond sinking fund hit an all-time high of $101 million. It was brought down to a manageable level of just over $80 million, but has crept up to roughly $95 million, and I would need to be advised as to where it is today. But certainly, as we look at what has happened, the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation poses a clear and present danger to its guarantor, which is the government of the Bahamas, and by extension, the people of the Bahamas. You see, because there are bonds due. In 2018, $5 million worth of bonds due. In 2023, $20 million due. 2024, $13.7 million. 2025, $46.3 million due. 2026, $25 million. 2028, $5 million. 2029, $5 million. So in the decade from 2021 to 2030, Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation has to find for bond redemption $115 million. Now this is a corporation that on a good day gets revenue of roughly $2.5 to $3.5 million per month. With that revenue, it has to pay staff, it has to pay recurrent expenses such as electricity, benefits, and so on and so forth. It also has to pay interest on bonds. And so what the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation has done is it has funded its recurrent expenses by issuing new bonds. And the persons or the corporations that have been purchasing those bonds were not independent purchases in many instances, because the single largest buyer of BMC bonds is NIB. And so what we have, Mr. Speaker, is a double whammy. You have a corporation which is fiscally on the brink, and it has been invested in by another corporation which is intended to protect Bahamians when they're most vulnerable. Let me go back to the statement made by the Honorable Leslie Miller when he said, and I repeat, never in the history of the Bahamas have so few screwed up so much for so many so quickly. Let us go back now and look at what happened in the United States between 2007 and 2009 with the mortgage subprime crisis. Mr. Speaker, the value of American mortgages, subprime mortgages, during that era was roughly $1.5 trillion. The size of the American economy is about $15 trillion. When the number of delinquencies hit 10%, the bottom fell out. And it had an effect that was felt all over the world, including the Bahamas. I remind you that the Mortgage Corporation has a delinquency rate of 42%. When we look at the status of the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, which only has 5.5% of the mortgages in the country, it may not seem to be significant. But when we add to that Bank of the Bahamas, NIB, Bahamas Development Bank, BPL or BEC, Water and Sewage Corporation, Mr. Speaker, you understand why fiscal prudence is so critically important. Mr. Speaker, when you look at the Mortgage Corporation fiasco, and you ask the question, when were the loans booked that went into default? The majority of the loans that went into default went in between the period of 2003 and 2007. You're all welcome to stand up and point order if you want to refute it. What has happened, Mr. Speaker, is you have a situation where the side opposite has run the Mortgage Corporation into the ground by incompetence, by mismanagement, by a simple lack of caring. They have booked loans that should not have been booked. They have awarded mortgages as rewards to the party faithful. They have refused to fund the bond sinking fund as they should. And as a consequence, Mr. Speaker, we are all paying for it now. What they will say is, fix it. You are now in power. You fix it.
That's what they said.
George Santayana said, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And so we will fix it. This menace-led administration will fix it. But we will let the people know how we got into this mess in the first place. And so when we say that we got to tighten our belt, when we say that we have to work together, when we say that we have to restore hope to the people of this country, never forget how we got in this mess in the first place. Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member, the member for Exumas and Ragged Island is on the point of order. State the point of order.
I wasn't there, but I speak based on the information presented today
from the member for Marathon.
Honorable member, what is the point of order?
The member is misleading, Mr. Speaker.
Go on.
And during the presentation for the member for Marathon, he referenced loans issued during the period 2007 to 2009. In fact, two of his examples reference that period. If we listen to the member for Elizabeth, the theory seems to be that all of the problems of the Bahamas Mortgage Corp was done during the administrations of the Progressive Liberal Party.
Honorable member,
Clearly, Mr. Speaker.
honorable member. If you rise on a point of order, particularly on a point of misleading the House, then your submission cannot be also misleading.
No, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member, the chair recalls the honorable member for Elizabeth saying that the majority,
But
not all, the majority of the delinquency occurred between the period of 2003, I think, to 2007.
let me just
That is what was said.
That's fine, Mr. Speaker. What I want to emphasize, though, is that the examples proffered by the member for Marathon is not exactly consistent with the theories that the member for Elizabeth is presenting. And I know he is not intentionally being misleading, but Mr. Speaker, but I would invite him to be a little more objective with his analysis of what he sees. Dispassionate and objective, Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and Sutat. Are you on a point of order also?
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Having cleared up what you understood the member to have said in response to the member from Exuma's assertion about the anomaly between Marathon and South Beach, Elizabeth, Mr. Speaker, you said you heard him to say that some, no, I'm not challenging it here. You said some, most of the majority, that's the word you, majority. I then asked, Mr. Speaker, that you have him substantiate that or withdraw it. Substantiate that the majority of the loans granted by the Mortgage Corporation, the majority of them fell into that toxic wastebasket, which is alluding to that was given under the Progressive Party. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, you'll have to withdraw it.
Mr. Speaker,
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Elizabeth.
based on the portfolio of roughly 100 and of the delinquent arrears of the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, 40% of roughly 175 million. $4 million were booked in 2004, $8.5 million in 2005, $7 million in 2006, and $14 million in 2007. Now,
What he said was that a majority of the loans of the delinquency book was to the Progressive Liberal Party.
He didn't say that, honorable member.
Mr. Speaker, that's what you understood him to say.
He said the period, he gave a period.
Now we are qualifying it. Now we are qualifying it. That's not a thing. No, I'm not debating. No, we're clarifying it, Mr. Speaker. We want to make sure that the message,
Honorable members,
we want the message, the proper message to go there. We are qualifying it to a period when the objection was raised. It was in connection with the fact that he was putting, we understood him to be putting the blame, all of it,
who the captain,
as usual, on the PLP, right? We took issue with that. He's asserting, and as you understood him, the Speaker, which I didn't understand, but I accept that I may have not heard him properly, and I accept your position on it, that he said the majority of what I call toxic loans were under our watch, or granted under our watch. And all I'm asking is for him to establish it. Yeah. Now, if we're now moving to a point where he is saying he wants to put it within a time frame, then we are moving the goalpost. I will accept that too. But then I need him to lay on the table the time period within which he's speaking and identify those loans that were granted by the Progressive Party, or, Mr. Speaker, let him withdraw it. Or let him withdraw it. Let him withdraw it.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Elizabeth.
Mr. Speaker, the side officers have been spending so much time talking about the member for Elizabeth in the last week. Every day they talking about the member for Elizabeth. So I don't know why the water's running so. Okay.
Honorable members, just before we proceed, because I notice, and I don't want to evoke any memories, but I notice a trend again, particularly as it relates to the issue of substantiating a comment. Now, the premise upon which the rule is based is that if you are requiring someone to substantiate, you must first deny. So if the member who is requesting a matter to be substantiated must first deny the truth of the statement that was made. And so in the event that happens, then the chair will have to take a position on whether what is being presented will be sufficient to be tabled, or whether some additional evidence needs to be produced to support the assertion or the allegation. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Carolina, Queens, and Salvador.
So, Mr. Speaker, what I'm understanding you to say is that it's not sufficient to challenge the assertion.
No,
It's not sufficient to challenge it. There has to be a denial to the assertion.
yes.
Mr. Speaker, I just need clarification.
Yes, you have to take the position that you are denying the assertion or the allegation being made by a member,
Right.
and challenge that member then to substantiate it or withdraw it.
Yeah, so I just want to be clear. So we deny that the majority of the toxic loans, right, were issued, not period. See, first of all, Mr. Speaker, one of the questions you have, he speaks to what loans, the amount of loans that were issued. He doesn't speak to how much of those loans issued that were in fact delinquent. Therein lies another distinction. He said in this year, in 2002, this $4 million of loan was issued. And Mr. Speaker, we just want to clarify so we don't have to get into
Yes.
Yeah. So we don't know. So that's why I deny it until he's able to substantiate it. So I asked him to substantiate, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, I want to make sure this point is clear before we move on, because I can see it recurring. Honorable members, it's not sufficient to just simply say you deny unless you are also prepared to produce evidence to the contrary. You just cannot jump up or pop up and say you deny something and demand that it be substantiated. As I see that pattern developing. Now, that is not directed at you, honorable member. I just want to make sure as we go forward.
That's why I'm interested in this, in us going forward. Because, Mr. Speaker, right, we started off on the premise when this issue of substantiation arose, if I recall, I think your exact words, he who asserts must prove.
Right.
Right, so, and so in that context, I was of the view that just challenging would have been sufficient. We're now saying challenging is not sufficient, but rather I have to say I deny. So I just want to get it clear. So if I make an assertion, it's not sufficient for them just to say they deny unless they too are prepared to show that I'm not telling the truth. That's how far we're carrying it now, Mr. Speaker. I just want to know.
No, I don't know how you arrive at that point,
No,
honorable member.
what you said, Mr. Speaker, and I'm being guided. What I heard you to say, Mr. Speaker, is that if I cannot just jump up and say I deny, because I have to be prepared also to produce evidence to the contrary or information to the contrary. Is that what I heard?
Honorable member, let me just read Rule 88(1) for you. The Speaker in the House or the Chairman in committee of the whole House may require a member to withdraw a statement whether or not a point of order has been made by another member objecting to the statement, and whether or not the statement withdrawn, the person presiding may order that it be expunged from the records of the House. Now, what I don't want happening into the future is for the business of the House to be continually interrupted by members who are simply demanding that someone produces evidence when, in fact, the objection may not be a valid objection. So, in other words, the chair will exercise its discretion to determine whether or not the matter should be withdrawn or substantiated based on the objection.
I don't think, all I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, we are just trying to ensure that we understand the way forward. And that is, prior to now, it was a question of substantiate. And I did it on the assumption that he who asserts must prove. That was part of the reasoning in the previous rule. And I'm not challenging that. All I'm saying, so all I did was to challenge the assertion. And that only came about, Mr. Speaker, because of what you understood the members have said. That's the reason why it came about. I don't intend to be frivolous or facetious in any of the objections I may take. I don't intend to do that. And there could be, and it could be frivolous in that thing. But quite right. Yes, a mischief about it. And the mischief I could get up all the time and say, it's substantial. I appreciate that. But in this instance, this is not mischievous. He claims to have the material on which he's relying. And he's been reading it. And all I ask is for clarification, because I don't want
I can read some more.
the message out there to go
I'll lay it too.
that the most of the loans that were granted, or the majority were toxic because of something that the Progressive Party may have done. There may be, we may have done some things, but there may be an explanation for it. So
Yes.
once I get the facts, I'll be able to explain.
Yes, honorable member. Finally, on that, before you continue, honorable member for Elizabeth, with respect to points of order, we had a difficulty in the past distinguishing between a difference of opinion and a valid point of order with respect to infringement of the rules. Now, of course, when each member speaks, other members could disagree and have a difference of opinion, but that difference of opinion may not be necessarily an infringement of the rules, and then would not be a valid point of order. And that is the point I'm trying to drive home, that in this particular instance, it appears to the chair as if there is a difference of opinion with respect, or a disagreement with respect to what is being presented, as opposed to an infringement of the rules. Honorable member?
Debating.
He's happy that he's, of course, I never heard him said that was his opinion. I just heard him say, this is the fact. But if he's saying it's his opinion, then that's another matter. If we had heard opinion, we appreciate that if it's his opinion, I cannot object to his opinion. I may object to the material upon which he's basing his opinion, but not to his opinion itself. And I may say his opinion is flawed, but that'll be a subject of another discussion by looking at the material. But I never heard him say, my opinion is the majority of the loans, toxic loans, were granted by...
I hope this clock is not running. Chair recognizes Honorable Member for Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So that I can be more concrete, let us talk about the bond sinking fund arrears. Let's start with the year 1998, when the bond sinking fund arrears was 73 million. 99, 67 million. 2000, 61 million. 2001, 55 million. Now, if I remember correctly, there was a certain administration in office. And in 2002, things changed. So let's go 1998, 73 million, dropped to 67 million the following year, then 61 million, then 55 million, then 50 million. Now comes 2002, 56.8 million, up to 58.3, 62 million, then $100.9 million, then $101.7 million between 2002 and 2007. I'm going to table this. I'll table it. Okay? Now, that's the sinking fund. Okay? The deficit increased from 2002 is voted out of power. Through you, Mr. Speaker. The sinking fund deficit was $50 million. By 2007, it was $101 million.
Deficit?
Now, let's move forward. This January 2012 letter that I adopt, written by the financial controller, Brian Aubrey, at the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, to Mrs. Lorraine Ambrista, the permanent secretary then at the Ministry of Housing. And I'll read it for you, Mr. Speaker. We refer to the request from the Ministry of Finance for information on the investment requirement of the bond sinking fund and provide two scenarios. Scenario one, the present value of funds required to be invested today to meet the yearly principal payments only for the outstanding bonds. Interest will be paid from operations. Investment required $99.8 million. And the investment that existed at that point was 71 million and a requirement of 28 million. But if they went with scenario two, the present value of funds required to be invested today, January 2012, to meet yearly principal and interest payments for the outstanding bonds, requirement was $188,807,671, with a deficit at that point of $117,129. Now, Mr. Speaker, in the last 5 years leading up to 2017, there was no deposit of $117 million to shore up the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation. And so as I conclude, Mr. Speaker, today is a great day. The Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, under the leadership of this administration, is getting back to its mandate to allow Bahamians to have access to affordable housing. We are going to be transparent. We are going to be accountable, but we're going to let people know. And we adopt the words of the great Leslie Miller when he said about that side, never in the history of the Bahamas have so few screwed up so much for so many so quickly. So, Mr. Speaker, we have a lot of heavy lifting to do.
It is heavy.
We didn't ask for the mess to be found.
No.
But we are not going to shirk from our responsibility to fix it. We are going to commit to the Bahamian people that we're going to restore hope for them and for their children and for their grandchildren. We're going to ensure that this country gets back on a strong footing,
Back on our feet again.
that we can punch above our weight. And we hope that the Bahamian people never forget
Never.
what they did
Never.
to this country.
We can't forget.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable members. It has been moved and seconded that honorable member for Elizabeth, the communication that you just made, are you prepared to table that?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I'm quite happy to.
Okay, order that the
I have to put
communication-
it back together.
It has been moved and seconded that the following resolution be agreed and passed. Whereas the Treasurer of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the Treasurer, a corporation sole established under Section 4, subsection 1 of the Ministry of Finance Act, Chapter 23, Statute Law of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the Act, is seized in fee simple, in trust for Her Majesty, in right of our government of the said Commonwealth of the Bahamas, proposes of the said Commonwealth of the Bahamas for the public purposes of the hereditaments described in the schedule hereto, the hereditaments. Now, therefore, be it resolved that pursuant to Section 5, subsection 3A of this Act, this House approves the conveyance by the Treasurer to the purchaser of the hereditaments for the nominal sum of $10 in the currency. As many? The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for South and Central Andros.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I promise to be very brief in my presentation today. It was to the resolution on the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation 2018. Before I commence my brief comments, on behalf of the great people of Mangrove Key, South and Central Andros, I would like to note the fact that it was just yesterday, when the winds were blowing a bit high, that I had a chance to be at the Central Andros High School, part of my constituency, for the award ceremony yesterday. And the students, BGCSE passings, A to C in literature, 100%, Spanish, 100%, carpentry, 60%, food and nutrition, 60%, BJCs, A to C, craft, 100%, social service, social studies, 75%, Spanish, 93%. But generally, between A to C passes in the general school population has increased to just over 43%. I want to commend Mrs. Thompson, the principal at the Central Andros High School, DS, Ms. Michelle Boleg, Deputy Ms. Emily Miller, the academic staff and custodial staff at that great school, as also I commend those in the South Andros High School and also the Mangrove Key community. This is the beginning of the school year, where we need much assistance still at the South Andros High School, but I plan to be tomorrow at the public meeting at the Marion Forbes Center at 7 p.m. tomorrow in South Andros, my hometown, and also in Mangrove Key next week if God spares life, where the high school there also needs much work, and also the Point Rock Primary School in the Mangrove Key community. Mr. Speaker, I must also say that it was just last week I had a chance to join the leader of my party and also the member for Carmichael, member for Garden Hills, my friend, at the homegoing for the late Bahamian sculptor of note and renowned not only locally but also internationally, Mr. Stephen Burrows at the Grace Community Church. I want to thank his family posthumously for his contribution to our society, making us all ethnocentrically proud to be Bahamian. As one would go around the various roundabouts in different places in our city, for the work that he would have done, I would have met him years ago and I would have been a summer student at the then Bahamas Electricity Corporation when he had riding time going to Clifton Pier back in the 80s. And he, along with Huckle and Sid and the late Anthony Forbes, and many others, Mr. Basin would have been a young man in those days, and others, much younger man. And they would have been a part of that force that led the BEC. And moving along quickly to my friend Earl Thompson, on the passing of his father, Earl Thompson Sr., who served as a member of Parliament in this honorable place. Myself and Mr. Thompson we met many years ago in the media field, and he would have been back in the day at Love 97. I had the Broadcasting Corporation of the Bahamas. He eventually joined us at the Broadcasting Corporation of the Bahamas. I had an occasion or two to meet his father, a great man, understood what he believed, had differences with the Progressive Liberal Party, but he was a noble son, a patriot, one who did his best, and served the great community of Fort Charlotte. So to Earl Jr. and his family, and the Thompson family, and those in the community of Chippingham, who was saddened by his passing, and also the late Mr. Burroughs and others, we want to extend our condolences to them, and may their soul rest in eternal peace. Mr. Speaker, as I sat and listened just moments ago to the member for Elizabeth, one thought came to my collected mind. It's simply this. The member for Kalani had a good inclination, but I simply think it's simply the wrong messenger with a good message. That messenger cannot tell the PLP nor the Bahamian public at large about fiscal responsibility. It's simply the wrong messenger with a good message. Pure and simple. Mr. Speaker, if one wants to be honest, that member cannot speak to fiduciary responsibility. He would have lost it, because we would have noted that we would have left alone a matter where the leader of our party noted that the matter would have been sub judice, and we know if a member would have joined us in this honorable place, being brought before the court. So my inclination and my personal belief is that that member, the member for Elizabeth, should not be, I can take any one of these backbenchers saying that to the PLP, not him. He doesn't have, in my view, and I think it's almost unmitigated gall, to stand here this morning in a most condescending and didactic kind of way to tell us how to comport ourselves when it comes to financial prudency. It can't be that member. This same member, without approval of his cabinet ministers or even a board at PHA, would have done these. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to go there, but Mr. Speaker, he took us to task. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker,
honorable member.
I'm moving on, Mr. Speaker. I'm moving on.
For Bamboo-Town.
I'm moving on, Mr. Speaker.
The honorable member for Mangrove Tea.
Mr. Speaker, I retract that. I'm saying simply, Mr. Speaker, I go back. Mr. Speaker, I will not rile you. I'm in your house. I will be respectful, Mr. Speaker. I know you wanted me to go. Well, Mr. Speaker, I would simply say to you, Mr. Speaker, I would let cooler head prevail. I would simply say, Mr. Speaker, I would simply say,
honorable members.
Mr. Speaker, good message, wrong messenger. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation was established by an act of Parliament in August 1983, and services to the public commenced in October of the very same year. As an approved lender, the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation is authorized to make government-insured loans under the provisions of the Housing Act of 1967. The corporation may also make other, what I would note as private, mortgage loans to individuals seeking to construct, purchase, or repair, or simply enlarge their home, or to purchasing vacant land to construct a dwelling home. I've been told, Mr. Speaker, that currently the BMC lending rate is 75%, down from 6.7% interest, which should be lowered, which was anticipated to be lowered just over a year ago, to a lending of some 2% above prime. The ceiling on home and property loans is Reportedly, according to my last conversation with members involved, just over $237,000 and $60,000 on renovation and repair loans at the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation. The corporation regularly reviews applications that are presented for mortgage loans, Mr. Speaker. Applications presented have been for government-initiated projects in various government-initiated subdivisions in New Providence, Grand Bahama, and the Family Islands. However, a significant number of mortgages and loan requests for private-initiated projects are also still today being processed, although many are concerned about the process. And it is therefore hoped that we will get some further update as to where we are in this regard. Attracting and maintaining new business and mortgage loans is essential to the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation's continued financial stability. I too would like to join the member for Marathon as the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation celebrates its 35th anniversary not too distant future from now. And also to, although some might in their own way and covertly assail members of the staff of the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, I would like to publicly commend them, because I know it's not an easy task, and they must many times carry out for something. Someone would say that it's been sometimes a rough task, but they've been able to do it with relatively sound judgment and good decency in their stead. The Bahamas Mortgage Corporation is faced with increasing mortgage loan maturities in addition to the rigorous mortgage campaigns in the private banking sector that lure away some of the better BMC mortgage loans today, Mr. Speaker, I've been told. In this regard, under the government-initiated housing program, and particularly privately initiated home and lot purchase and/or construction program, the board has been in place that I would have been told since July 2012, back in the day, would have approved some 438 mortgages for a total value of some $50 million. A key component in this regard has been the drive to partner with private home developers to meet the country's demanding housing needs. And as for the aspirations of the Minister of the Environment and Housing in the past administration and the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation Board of Directors, we've been told that the waiting list at the Ministry of Housing is well over some 10,000 persons. So it requires that the present staff and the Minister and Board of Directors would have to apply themselves to thinking out of the box. Mr. Speaker, these are some very interesting times in our country. And I would hope that members of the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation would apply themselves to even looking at Family Island developments as the way to go. The work would have been done already for a mortgage subdivision in the community of Mangrove Key. All infrastructure is in place. The Money Rock subdivision in South Andros is one that leaves much to be desired. We could have utilized much more of that wide expanse of land in the community of South Andros. And so therefore, the task is to people, persons like myself who are serving today, if given the opportunity to make life better for those who are domiciled in Family Island communities such as mine in the community of Andros. I know one thing, Mr. Speaker, as I move quickly, that the service lot policy of the present administration, in my view, has failed and failed miserably. Many Bahamians cannot qualify. In my view...
Honorable member, are you on the point of order, honorable member? Marathon?
The same point of order.
Could you state the point?
And I disagree with that statement. He's misleading the House, and I ask him to bring evidence to support it. Because the government service lots initiative, let me finish, the government service lots that we have put in, they're all fully subscribed. Hold on now. They're all fully, now I'm talking about the one in Sunset Close subdivision, fully subscribed. The one in Roma Street, fully subscribed. We got 370 lots lined up in Carmichael Village. I deny that false assertion, and I challenge you to deny, denounce, rebuke that, and I challenge you to bring evidence to support it. Bring your evidence.
Honorable Member for Mangrove Key, Central and South Andres, are you prepared to
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker,
withdraw or change
Speaker,
the statement?
I commence my commentary by saying, in my opinion, I did say that, Mr. Speaker. I have my opinion, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that's, as a matter of fact, it's interesting, Mr. Speaker. This is the minister, the substantive minister, who's under whose purview housing falls. And he should have presented that information this morning, knowing that I might be inclined to talk about it. So the fact of the matter is, since he's bringing it up, he should be able to come forward and present the information to us in his honorable place, Mr. Speaker. Until he does that, I'm inclined to stick to my belief. I said, in my opinion, that's my view. It has failed. And that's my point, and that's my perspective, Mr. Speaker. I have the right to have my opinion. Mr. Speaker, the average Bahamian, especially those who are unwed or what we connote as single mothers, are many, many times challenged to even survive on a day-to-day basis in our society. And we've heard the stories, we saw the stories in the press just some weeks ago about this housing program itself and what the tendency were and how many persons were challenged to qualify. So I await the laying of the documents by the honorable member for Marathon that speaks in a very pertinent way to the issue that he stood on his feet on the point of what this moment spoke to this moments ago. But we've heard the stories over the years. And I note the fact that it was because of the intervention of the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation that persons like my mom, Deaconess Lily Mae Forbes, who resides in McCullough Corner East, would have gotten a house when we lived, coming from Andros as a young boy back in the day on the Sea Queen and the Captain Moxie.
She worked hard.
And worked hard at 30 plus years at KFC, saved a couple dollars. And it was the good intervention of the PLP administration over the hill, unpaid her mortgage. Through ASU, whatever it took, but legitimately she paid our mortgage to put a roof over our head for us to have pride as a people in the inner city or the heritage community.
Who was the minister? Who was the minister?
It was the Honorable Alfred T. Maycock and the Honorable Hubert Engel. And so, the Minister of Housing at the time was a very good friend of mine and one who I admire. And so, Mr. Speaker, I leave some things right there. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, for mothers especially to qualify today, it's a challenging task. And so, when I heard a voice note just the other day, and I know that the member for Marathon called them in this very nice and, I guess, more effervescent kind of language, vacate order. Simply eviction orders, man. You understand, Mr. Speaker, just to hear a voice note of the lady saying that she was in the house when the lock was being changed, to sit in there and saying that, Mr. Speaker, you can't speak for me. You can't make, Mr. Speaker, I'm not inclined to sit, Mr. Speaker, because I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, I'm saying what I heard.
Honorable member,
Mr. Speaker.
Are you on a point of order, Yamako? The member's on a point of order. Could you say the
So he
point of
must
order?
be inclined to sit if I rise on a point of order. I may not be right. Mr. Speaker, in terms of the members misleading the House, the project instituted by this government for
Honorable member, let him. Honorable member, he's on a point of order. Be precise, honorable member for Yamako.
Yes, I'm being precise, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my good friend and my constituent, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Honorable member for South and Central Andros has suggested that the program is a failure. And I'm inviting...
Honorable member, he did indicate that that was his opinion.
His opinion.
So,
but Mr. Speaker, I can rise on
the next point?
I can rise on a... Mr. Speaker, I can rise, and I'm certain that you will disabuse me of a wrong belief if I am, to demonstrate that his opinion is erroneous and false. And this is why I say it. The government has selected portions of land where it's putting in the infrastructure and lowering the price of land way beneath the normal price, and giving it some land for less light, water, sidewalk, road, you name it, and giving it to you for sometimes less than $15,000 or $15,000. The only other alternative is to give it for free. And for, having regard to the history of land in the Bahamas and what we're trying to do to liberate land, I don't see how it could be a failure. When this member, and he loves his mother, I love her too. When he's identified what is the ethnos of our community, that we worked hard, we saved, we went into ASUs and we paid. The other point, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member,
So I'm just suggesting that his belief is erroneous and it's false and is making a poor excuse, and I don't want the Bahamian community to accept it. The other thing that he said, Mr. Speaker, the other thing that he said is that the persons came there and just break down the doors, knock the doors. It gives the erroneous, it gives, Mr. Speaker, he says,
Honorable member,
Mr. Speaker,
Honorable member, your clock has stopped. Honorable member for Yamako, I don't recall those words.
Okay, he said that the locks were changed, but it gives the erroneous belief. It gives, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member. Honorable member for Mango Key.
Say earlier, when I spoke to what is, Mr. Speaker, he doesn't deny, if he says that I'm talking foolishness, he doesn't deny what I said earlier is not true. That is Bahamian. Now, Mr. Speaker, he leads off a story by saying they just came and changed the locks, as if nothing happened before. There was a process. So don't give that impression, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member.
That's the point.
Honorable member for Mango Key.
Mr. Speaker, this is
South and Central Andros. You are able to continue.
I heard, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if the member for Yamacraw wants to make a contribution to the resolution, the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, he is free to do so. But don't be coming here wasting time on my time, in my view, Mr. Speaker, and my view on my time. This is my time. I'm not...
Honorable member. Honorable member. Honorable members, resume your seats. Honorable members, resume your seats for a moment for me. Honorable members, I want to point you all to Rule 33, subsection 16 and 17. Get familiar with that before we proceed, because I see us proceeding along those lines. 16 and 17, Rule 33, 16 and 17. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Mango Key, South and Central Andros.
Mr. Speaker, as a senior, and one who has a storied history in this place, I would be obliged to follow your order, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I was simply sticking to my story. I said that from the voice note I received, and information that was passed on to me by others who've been so informed. I simply said that the families were in the house in Millennium Garden when they said they heard the locks were being changed. That is not my part of it to say what would have happened prior with the Mortgage Corporation. No, after. I am simply saying, I'm sticking to my story, Mr. Speaker. That's my story. The member for Yamacraw can get up and tell his story. That's his story to tell. And I have my view about the fact that, in my view, the PLP's platform and program of a turnkey exercise work best in the Bahamian context. And I will simply stick to my story. We in the PLP believe in constructing homes for Bahamians. We believe in making life a little easier for our people, Mr. Speaker. We believe in lifting persons in despair and those who are in the challenged community and making life better for them. We're not saying we don't want people to be responsible and not pay their mortgage, but all we're saying at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, we want to believe, and we believe in the Bahamas, that gives people a hand up and give them an opportunity in their fair land. That is our, and you could buy lots until you're tired. Unless you could build something on that lot, Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, it says nothing to augment life for the poor and the everyday challenge in our society. That's my view, and that's the view of the Bahamian people, and that's the way they see the Bahamian, how they see the PLP. And I would not change that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I listened also to the member for Elizabeth, it's interesting, Mr. Speaker, to hear him speak about fiscal responsibility. And I simply go back to the line, good message. Kalani, wrong messenger.
Honorable member, I just referred you to Rule 3316 and 17.
Speaker, I'm not impugning anybody. I'm not.
It is.
Mr. Speaker, he would have connoted what he wanted and what he said about the PLP. I never said we accepted it.
Honorable member, the chair.
Okay,
It's
Mr. Speaker, I
of the view.
withdraw. If it pleases the chair, I would withdraw. I would withdraw. I would refrain. Mr. Speaker, I would simply, I know the fact that today, Mr. Speaker, the students at the St. Augustine's campus in Trinidad, the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, are listening to my presentation right here today. Out of the 39 students here today, only 4 have government assistance or scholarships today in the medical program. Also, we must note the fact that as the good member for Elizabeth would have made his commentary, we are challenged in the notion of junior doctors who are still tasked and challenged by the conduct by the same member, and we've taken industrial actions which has implication and import for what I call basic health care in the Bahamas today. When persons from my constituency who have no medical insurance would come to New Providence for basic health care, because today there's still not a medical doctor in Mangrove Key nor a medical doctor in South Angeles proper. There's no doctor, Mr. Speaker, and the people that are they're listening to me on radio and watching on TV. They know I am telling the truth on their behalf. No doctor in South Angeles, no Mangrove Key. I listen to the stories, Mr. Speaker, on fiscal responsibility. I listen about the issue of fidelity and fiduciary and trust. But at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, I'm saying at the end of the day, the member for, I can never forget, the member for Kalani, the member for Kalani was the one who virtually embarrassed the Crystal administration into signing those doctors and assigning them to the PHN of the public health care system, and saying that we got to make sure the doctors are going to work and have something to do. But I don't know, Mr. Speaker, how wood is good for Peter can't be good for Paul. If the member for Kalani stood right here, I meant figuratively, but Mr. Speaker, how the member for Kalani could have stood in this place and defended doctors about 2.5 years ago, and today we're still hearing reports that the good member for Kalani plans to intimate or interject or intervene in this process so that we can see some positive development in this issue. Mr. Speaker, it has implications for family island communities such as mine. I hasten, Mr. Speaker, in my final few minutes, to note the fact that we in the Bahamas are still challenged in keeping what I call good territories and government offices in good shape. It's a concern generally in this society. And you can just look at buildings such as looking at the Mortgage Corporation. I wish there could have been a way that we could maintain government buildings, Mr. Speaker, because nothing makes a person, an everyday Bahamian, feel better than feel good. Like when they go to work and the environs are, and the ambience, the aesthetics are in good place. You can feel good about telling your friends or your family members to come and visit you. And one could look, this has been happening over the years, both sides. It's embarrassing. Look at the Clarence A. Bain building, the closed Rodney Bain building, General Post Office, a historic building. And the list goes on. And you say to yourself, why we can't keep them? That's why when you know, Mr. Speaker, talking about government building and the mortgage corporation, how do we maintain them? The good overnight member for a marathon, but note the fact that when you go to the Paul Farquharson Center, there's a certain pride it brings to go there, Mr. Speaker, as a proud Bahamian. When you see certain landmarks, like you see at the LPIA, Livingston International Airport, among others, it gives you a certain pride. And so I am saying for the Bahamian public, and when I look at the historicals of Over the Hill boy and the Family Island fellow, you look at landmarks over the hill. When you saw the Ministry of Foreign Affairs building that I support the resolution for, there's a certain thing and elegance and pomp and circumstance that came to mind when you attended events here back in the day with Sir Clem and others. The late Sir Clementi Maynard, I would say, that foreign affairs and protocol had a certain kind of vista about it and feel. And I wish we can I know we've moved forward as a country and money is progress. But there's something about it that felt regal to some degree. Going to the post office to collect letters felt like an event back in the day. Because you were proud to be going to the post office. You were proud to be going to certain buildings, Clarence A. Bain building, knowing the contribution of my proud Androsian son. And just to think about a person like Dr. C.B. Moss, who's now maybe just sitting in Baintown today, the Wesley Church Hall, for example. And you can think of the Candy Kitchen, just on the hill from us. Audley Camp buildings on East Street itself. I am saying, Mr. Speaker, as we think and look at preserving these sites, and I want to wish the Mortgage Corporation the best in their new facilities, that we could find a way so that we can preserve some of these, what I call them, heritage sites, Mr. Speaker, in the inner city community. It does much for the historical trappings and makes us feel proud as a people. The member for West End and Bimini, member for East Abaco was also there, and the member for Tall Pines when we were in Jamaica. And we saw that pride of the Jamaican people as they showcased their country for a day to us as we ran around the bus. And I would have attended school and I know how they feel about their country. Saw the same in Antigua with Ambassador Clarence Henry and others. The pride. And when the persons come to the Bahamas, the first thing we do is the member for Bamboo Town would call me, we'll take him over to Atlantis. Lord have mercy. And so we'll go and have dinner. Of course, the member for Bamboo Town signs a check. I can't sign a check. And they would take them to Atlantis. Whereas the member for tourism, Minister for Tourism, member for St. Anne's, we couldn't find them. So we had to move. Freetown, sorry, we couldn't move. We couldn't find them. But the fact of the matter is, though, concomitantly, we go to the Caribbean region. They want to take you to a Hellshire Beach. They want to take you to the forts, St. Mitchell, I think it is, in St. Kitts. And these historical sites. And I said to myself, well, my Lord, why when someone come here, we couldn't have the same kind of facility up at the water tower. Where back in the day when I came from Andros as a youngster, we would have gone around to the fort and we had a thing where you didn't mind the police running you, you were doing the speech and you got $1 for a tip and you said at the end of the speech, I don't do this as a job, but we do this for a tip. And that time the police come and just the funding they run from the police. If you got $1, you got $1 every time. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, there was a certain pride about being from Jail Cat Alley and McCullough Corner, Mason's in Lewis Street, and Mr. Penn in Beryl Ground Corner. So for me, this building, I would have had a reflective moment there standing here, sitting here, thinking about that building in my early days as a production assistant at the Broadcasting Corporation of the Bahamas, just out of the associate degree program at the College of the Bahamas back in the day. And to see that building now being revived and people, our Bahamian people are going to be there in that building, it speaks well to the future of us building, empowering, and going forward together. Mr. Speaker, this is a resolution that I must support. Now, there are some things that I would want to extrapolate and some thoughts I would have want others not to say that kind of led me into being less than at my best. And I would not allow, Mr. Speaker, since you one I respect, allow those irritants to get the better part of me today.
Honorable member.
Mr. Speaker, I'll change that. I'll say, Mr. Speaker, those irritating commentary to get the better part of me today. Mr. Speaker, one thing that's the one thing, Mr. Speaker, as one who's been around a little while, and I don't take laughs very well. I grew up as an island boy. So they all know how I go. I don't bother with nobody. But if you bother with the hometown boy, you ain't gonna take laughs very well. That's how it works in here. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I get certain leverage attitude in here, man. I'm a senior member. I've been told I must stay within my zone and not be ashamed to know the fact that I'm a senior man by a senior man who gave me that privilege. Lord Abaca knows of whom I speak. I'll leave it right there. I was told, said, you and the person said it to me, say, you and Kalani boom down the same day. So that's it. Mr. Speaker, that's behaving now. That means all that means is we signed the document the same way. So I don't want nobody to take notice of the conduct. I ain't want nobody saying nothing out of the way. So that is only Bahamian vernacular. Let's stick with it. Mr. Speaker, in closing, for generations, and the purchase of land and a home has been considered a Bahamian dream. The government, in its wisdom, would have created the Mortgage Corporation and other agencies to help young Bahamians achieve that goal. But we must continually evolve and adapt to meet the demand and the changing circumstances. We must also educate and protect our people from those who would prey upon them and take advantage of them for financial gain. But you and I must also take responsibility, Mr. Speaker, as an everyday Bahamian for our actions. Because someone wants to lend you money doesn't mean they wish to tell you all the truth, all the nuances involved about you having the capacity or the ability to repay as you would borrow. We must also think out of the box to ensure that all Bahamians have the opportunity to own their own home. The Family Islands present an opportunity to make this a reality. There's plenty land in Andros, plenty land in Abaco, still plenty land in Exuma, plenty land in Eleuthera, plenty land in Cat Island. Remember, for Yamakro would never visit Cat Island, but he always talked about Cat Island. Mr. Speaker, in my view, I've enjoyed the same. Mr. Speaker, we're having a little levity. Through sustainable developments that will attract workers and support industries, we can create a shifting in our population to the Family Islands, where there are acres of affordable land that can be translated into affordable housing as we seek to build a better Bahamas. So therefore, to those like Talia Duncombe in South Andros, do not lose hope. For those who remain in the community of South Andros, I want you to know that better days are coming, not by and by, but very soon. I would want to say to those in the educational system who feel challenged by the repairs and other things not done at your school, and those who want to remain and be empowered, and those who are in New Providence who want to return home, be able to come together with a grander vision and maybe with some assistance from the Mortgage Corporation, maybe we could find a way to facilitate home ownership in our family islands in a meaningful way. As we wait for the government to come forward with this land policy, that we know would empower many persons, especially in my community. It's important because persons could upgrade their properties to their grandparents' properties or dwelling houses or homes so that they can come to the bank and improve properties to have what we call B&B or simply for family vacations or when persons would have, when they would be homecoming and other family island events. So, Mr. Speaker, it's against that backdrop and as a burgeoning diplomat, and the bell has been told that I would take my seat. I note the fact that I would therefore today celebrate the resolution and its import, that the legacy of the late Sir Clementi Maynard, Paul Lawrence Adderley, the Honorable Janet G. Bostwick, and all the others, including my most recent contemporary and friend, the Honorable Frederick Audley Mitchell and others, would see this government allowing that building to be properly utilized so that for years to come, the history of what we call the Ministry of Foreign Affairs real building being utilized by Bahamians in the 21st century and beyond. Long live the Bahamas as we continue to build, empower, and move forward, onward, upward together. I support this so said resolution, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Elizabeth. Just before you proceed, Honorable Member, I'm in possession of the contribution by the Honorable Member for Elizabeth, and now order that these documents do lie on the table. Honorable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just in response to the Honorable Member for South and Central Andros, with whom I've been in contact repeatedly, there is a locums physician who will be covering the patients in Mangrove Key, and they will have a full-time physician appointed as of the first of the year, I'm advised. He's been very patient. The community has been very patient. The Honorable Member is able to get information from me directly, and I'm quite happy to let him know that his community be well served.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many, Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Centerville.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon to you and members of the Parliament. What a privilege it is to represent the people of Centerville, and by extension, of course, the people of the Bahamas. I'd first like to give thanks to God for this journey of a lifetime. Thank you to the people of Centerville for entrusting me with your direction. I'd want to say thank you to the Over the Hill unit in the Office of the Prime Minister for their collaborative technical mission with the Pan American Health Organization and the World Health Organization. It was a privilege to have attended the workshop at the National Training Agency yesterday, and I participated in a breakout session on health and disease control in the Over the Hill community, sharing ideas on how we can improve the health of the Centerville community through effective communication and education. Needless to say, I was impressed. To one of the oldest people in my community, the community of Centerville, we will celebrate the birthday of the legendary Mr. John Chippy Chipman, King of Culture on Chipman Estates, West Bay Street, from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. this Friday, October 5th. All are invited. Thank you to the Commissioner of Police, Ministry of Works, and all the government agencies that have been a part of ensuring that we send a positive message with regards our culture and what is truly Bahamian. So, hope to see you all there on Friday. The country is forever indebted, Mr. Speaker, to my grandfather so much, for he has given so much. for the benefit of the many of us. Thank you to the Minister of Finance for the release of the public-private partnership policy, which I had requested last week. Such a policy is very important to the Bahamas, owning its economy and its related services. Bahamas, please review and pay close attention, as we would like to think this is in line with the government's agenda to restructure the technical and promotional capacity and framework of the Bahamas Investment Authority, as noted in its HR consultancy advertisement in July. I'd first like to address the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation's relocation. The mission of the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation is to stimulate, encourage, and promote home ownership for Bahamians with low to moderate income by providing superior mortgage finance services. In 2008, Mr. Speaker, I would have had an opportunity to participate in an operational audit of the corporation. As this journey continues, after many recommendations and many hours of structural changes and suggestions, 10 years later, and not much have changed. The concerns are still the same. Politics still appears to be the most non-progressive institution in the world, and of course here in the Bahamas. Families are without homes, and homelessness is on the rise. Centerville has issues with homelessness. I must say, I'm very proud to note that one of the key persons who addressed the Over the Hill workshop, Dr. Daniel Buss, PAHO advisor for climate change and health, said, and I adopt his quote, "I am against blaming the victims." Needless to say, my sense of commitment when working along with someone who shares a similar belief. This belief, Mr. Speaker, comes from a strong sense that enough has been taken from us as a people. However, there is no, and that is no, excuse for irresponsibility. Therefore, we must take responsibility for our actions and make payments as agreed to. I first would like to speak to the relocation of the BMC. As you would have seen in the resolution, the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation is now moving into the old Foreign Affairs building on East Hill Street. I would like to thank the government for preserving the architectural structure of the building. I'd like to say thank you to Ms. Alicia Oxley from the Antiquities, Monuments and Museum Corporation, who has been instrumental in architectural preservation and actually got me to understand how the architecture of our buildings have an impact on who we are, how we think, and where we want to go as a people. Architecture, Mr. Speaker, has shaped who we are as a people and has played a significant role in our culture and patterns of behavior. Our colonial heritage must be preserved. One writer in The Guardian would have spoken to historical preservation, the restoration and conservation of our historic buildings. Architect Tony Jervis would have restored Villa Doyle, now the National Art Gallery. Pamela Burnside earlier this year would have written that many old buildings which recorded our historical past and presented our architectural heritage have long since been destroyed in favor of soulless parking lots. Most of these that remain are either decayed or threatened by demolition. Let's keep the souls of the people at the forefront, Mr. Speaker, of our creativity and the need to progress. The hearts of the people must be preserved through history and cultural identification. Our people is why tourists return to the Bahamas. So let's preserve them. Let's protect them, and let's promote them. So kudos to all Bahamians who continue to fight for our natural resources, our heritage, access to our beaches, and our culture. The Bahamas Mortgage Corporation have been fighting with issues over the years. Once again, the minister responsible is supposed to table the audited financial statements of the corporation to this House so that we know the state of affairs. I believe, like AMMC, these audited financial statements, well, I know, have not been tabled in this House with regards to the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation since 2012. I actually saw an article where the last auditors indicated they were unable to form an opinion based on the inadequacies of accounting records and hence scope limitations. Since then, Mr. Speaker, the corporation has been approved yet to borrow another $100 million. You see, Bahamians, borrowing from Peter to pay Paul will not cut it. Governments have been doing it for many years, and we, the people, have been doing it for many years. I would have mentioned in my presentation last week on the financial responsibility bill, the financial culture of the Bahamas, how politicians have made us dependent on them, how we tend to live above our means, how our credit situation at the government and personal levels are impacted by certain decisions and priorities. The political crossroads, Mr. Speaker, at this time are treacherous, and we must find a way out. A government-owned organization demanding payments to take care of their responsibilities while families are asked to vacate homes. Children are destabilized and educational imbalance becomes the consequence. This is relevant as we continue to offload buildings and debt that by international public accounting standards would have to be placed back on the record so that we know our direct and our indirect obligations. Operational issues like a distinction between the responsibilities and obligations of the Department of Housing and the BMC must be clear and enforced, otherwise we are going nowhere fast. Today, the resolution at hand to purchase land for $10 is somewhat straightforward. The Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, have been renting a building since its inception. And this move, I am sure, is a huge step in the life and organizational culture of that organization. However, Mr. Speaker, we cannot run away from the issue of politics and delinquencies. We all know politics got us there at BMC. There are persons without homes, Mr. Speaker. There are persons who may believe they don't owe the government anything. There are persons who have not paid, and there may be others who have no intention to pay. Yes, the politics got us here. So where do we go from here? That's right. Yes, I am one that believes politics has raped our people of their birthright, plagued a generation with generational loans, and crippled a nation into a useless dependency on something that just will not last.
Yes. Yes.
So, Bahamians, those of you with or even without mortgages at BMC, let's work together towards becoming sufficient so our votes will never depend on a political key to our house.
Yes. Yes.
Let's work on meeting our obligations so we could tell any politician not to come here and mean it. In a time of increased taxes, compromised healthcare systems, limited resources, and now homelessness, Mr. Speaker, I must say, this is a situation of politics personified and the manifestation of a political culture that will not work in the new Bahamas. The interconnectivity of the Housing Act and the BMC Act needs review. This might only be resolved through intentional and deliberate policies that take into consideration an evolving culture of accountability and responsibility. On that note, Mr. Speaker, Centerville supports the resolution. However, we encourage the organization to meet its statutory requirements to this House. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Angliston.
Thank you, Speaker. I will. Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the people of Angliston who have given me the privilege and the opportunity to stand in this honorable house. And I want to assure them, if they don't believe it by now, that I will seek to be a voice in this parliament for their interests without fear or favor, and that on this particular issue, I again rise on their behalf to be their voice. Speaker, the people of Angliston, they face many challenges in this country, as I've said over and over. It's a particular community that faces high rates of unemployment, and the issue of housing is a real issue for many people that live in that community. And for people in Angliston in general, the struggle is real, Mr. Speaker. One of the major challenges being faced by my constituents is, and let me just say, I'm very pleased to come after the member for, what's your constituency name? South Andros, Mangrove Key, and Central Andros, for his very strong representation on leading on our behalf. But one of the major challenges faced by my constituents is what is being faced every day in our national public health care system. And the member would have spoken to that. Anyone who had the occasion to be admitted to the hospital or to visit someone in the hospital there will understand of which I speak. It is indeed a crisis. It's a crisis. And it appears as if this crisis is building momentum. And to some degree, it is terrifying. It's terrifying what's happening in our public health care system. It's terrifying in its implications. But despite this, there seems to be no real intervention in sight. I don't see it, I don't hear it by this government. Apart from what I call a chronicness in describing the problem, and I've said that before in here, which the current minister, the member for Elizabeth, who seconded this resolution, has had a penchant for, and he's proven to be truly expert at, there appears to be no apparent solution or imminent intervention that has yet to be shared with the Bahamian people. Meantime, Bahamians, by and large, very ill Bahamians, are being subjected to conditions and circumstances which are really, really not good. They're not good. And I'm using that diplomatic language because I think it's important to use guarded language at this time. The situation is very serious. There are many issues, and the agitation of the doctors is bringing to light these issues. And we await the Prime Minister's intervention, because he says he will step in and hopefully a solution will be found to their plight. We learned recently in a very sort of bizarre piece in the Tribune, I don't know where that came from, I attribute it to the minister, but I don't know. You know, he says no, because I know he wouldn't do that, I hope. But we're learning through a leaked memo, apparently, that there is a critical and dire situation with the dialysis patients in the public health care system in this country. And this was disclosed in a leaked PHA memo, suggesting that patients are not receiving premium time on the machines and are instead being what I call shortchanged due to a myriad of challenges. This is raising the specter of the possible or even probable, I say probable, I'm not a scientist, impact this is having on the well-being of dialysis patients. And for all those who have loved ones on dialysis, this is beyond disconcerting, Mr. Speaker. I recall the ardent commitment and advocacy of the member for Elizabeth while in opposition, in particular promising national health insurance for catastrophic illness. I think the philosophical difference was that we were looking at primary health care
which I still think is the way to go, because we have a public health crisis in this country with the chronic non-communicable diseases and the global illness that our people face as a people. It was a good place to start. But the former the then in opposition, the member for Elizabeth and his party, then also the member for Kalani, the leader, now the prime minister, disagreed with that approach. And their approach was that we should instead focus on catastrophic illness. They promised that that would be their approach to national health insurance. And it is my submission that complete kidney failure has to be catastrophic illness. I don't think you could describe anything more catastrophic than the kidneys don't work. And this is what dialysis patients are facing. But instead of telling us, delivering on us with these words you told us when you sought to scuttle our efforts at national health insurance, at primary health care, when you said you were going to bring national health insurance for catastrophic patients, instead we're hearing from this government about how they could raise money from these people who, by and large, I believe, if not all, they have no insurance, no medical insurance, and who, by and large, many of them don't have the resources, and you have to be really wealthy anyhow. If you have catastrophic illness,
Honorable Member Ferguson, the
Yes.
member for Elizabeth, are you on a point of order?
On a point of order, Mr. Speaker.
State the point, please.
The honorable member is on a good wicket. However, the one statement that she did make, she meaning the honorable member, the government is trying to raise money from these people. It is not our intention to remove the safety net from any disadvantaged individual. But the truth is that we need the revenue within the Public Hospital Authority to provide services, particularly to those people who don't have the means to take care of themselves. So please, let's understand that. Let's not mislead the public.
I'm a member of the public. I listen to the member. His language misled me. But in any event, you've clarified it. You've clarified what the intent is, but you still didn't tell me about your national health insurance, though. What about your national health insurance? You sought to scuttle a genuine attempt to bring health care across, the government,
Are you on a point of
the
order?
opposition.
Honorable Member Ferguson, are you on a point of order, Elizabeth?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honorable member directed and accused me of behavior that I am certainly not, that I did not commit, okay? Now, if the honorable member would like to suggest in other words that perhaps I pointed out the challenges of an ill-conceived national health insurance plan, I'll accept that. But I would like her to withdraw the language that she used to disparage my character and my privilege.
I don't know. Are you objecting to the word scuttle?
The honorable member said that I was trying to scuttle the NHI program. I did no such thing. I supported NHI. That has been I have been on record from the beginning. What I have said was that they needed to do it properly. That's all I said.
Honorable Member Ferguson, he's objecting to the word scuttle.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, I'll withdraw the word scuttle and I'll say derail. Is that better? Mr. Speaker, but the member's response is very interesting because he says, I'm for NHI, but we ain't hear him talk about NHI since they took office. I hear about it. Am I missing something in the dialogue? You have a Minister of Health who says, I support national health insurance, and he said before the election, in catastrophic illness instances, but yet we've heard nothing said about that by this administration. So the point I'm making, Mr. Speaker, is that we are facing a crisis. There were efforts, apparently there were philosophical differences on how to approach those healthcare challenges. But the member, well, not the member, but the member's the Minister of Health. But he was one of the articulate people on this issue. In fact, he spoke about everything before the elections. And he still has a penchant to do so today. No, it's nothing personal, but it ain't personal. It ain't personal. Exuma say, not yet. He can speak next. But we seeing no solutions on the health care. So I'm just saying, I'm just talking about the challenges people face. Because in Angleton, there are a lot of people on dialysis, and and I know them, and it's sickening what is happening in this country, Mr. Speaker. And so, as I indicated, I recall the ardent advocacy and commitment by the member for Elizabeth while in opposition, in particular, and I just want to repeat this, because we got to remember where we are. Because, sometimes they say people got short memories. But I remember when he was promising NHI for catastrophic illnesses. And he talked a lot about NHI. But we are instead hearing about extracting payments. But he said, no, not extracting payments, but extracting payments somewhere along the line, he says, to obtain resources for this. But it's not the National Health Insurance Plan. I know it's not that. What he's articulating is now taxing the healthcare system with a view to underwriting the public healthcare costs. So we're not hearing about national health insurance no more. So I just want to put that on the table, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, the argument has in effect been turned upside down. And yet the member for Elizabeth, instead of addressing these compelling challenges, which really I would have thrown a little bit about that in this speech, the member has instead come here and sought to make what I describe as weak political brownie points when he has on his plate so many serious issues. I believe the member for Elizabeth, and also the move of the resolution, the member for Marathon, sought to make some point about fiscal prudency and the state of our public-owned entities. And it was, for me, beyond amusing to hear to use the member for Andros, use South Andros, Central Andros, to use some of his language, Mangrove Tea, didactic instruction, to hear from them. Because with all of the innuendo that was built in, I think the member for Marathon was a little more discreet or more innuendo-ish. The member for Elizabeth was very explicit about, I think he referred to political cronyism. Well, with all of that, I think you, okay, whatever language you used, you said, I made a note of it. Are you challenging me? You challenging me? Okay. All right.
Mr. Speaker, Honorable Member for Elizabeth, did you recognize this Honorable Member for Elizabeth?
The member for Angleton has misrepresented what I've said, and I would like her to retract her statement. I never said anything about political cronyism.
Honorable Member for Angleton?
Yes, I'm trying to find the exact language.
It's not there.
The language...
It's not there.
Oh, I think I made a note.
Just withdraw and move on.
Yeah, well, we'll get the speech.
Just withdraw and move on.
The language used...
Withdraw and move on.
The language used was to give the impression...
Honorable Member for Angleton, the member for Elizabeth is objecting to you alleging that he used the word cronyism.
Well, he didn't use the word cronyism. He suggested, Mr. Speaker, the member sought to suggest that the innuendo of the member...
Are you withdrawing the word cronyism?
I'll withdraw the word cronyism. The member sought to imply that it was under the Progressive Liberal Party that political loans or mortgages were extended. I say cronyism. He don't want to use that word. That's the word I use. Okay? But that's what he was seeking to give the impression. See, it's always about the politics. The politics. So the member was sought to give the impression that the government, the PLP government, when they are in power, they just do these things. But when they're in power, they can do these things right. Yes, we got it. We got it good, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, this is coming from an administration in which the same two members, Marathon and Elizabeth, who came in here and talked about fiscal prudency and all these things, sat around the table, who just a day or two ago purchased a whole hotel, which is described as a bad deal. And I'm trying to remember the components of it. I've gone through it before in this house. You look at the $65 million purchase price, not including the insurance, the severance pay, the inventory that the people go on with. You all in, and on and on and on. What's the total amount? 100 million? What is it, Zuma? 100 million plus. Then they seem not to have been. I don't know. I can't speak. Maybe you knew. Maybe you knew you were cutting this deal for us. But it appears as if you're finding out, along with the rest of us, the things that were not thought about in the course of this negotiation. So they can come in here now and tell us about fiscal prudence, and this is where you've committed the Bahamian people, and you're going to come in here and preach and point the finger and castigate? I don't think so, Mr. Speaker. This administration is so duplicitous and awash with empty words that it is disconcerting. I use that word again. It's you know, I don't know. It's just utterly awash. They are awash with empty words. They come in, they say all the pretty words. Speaker, Ken Island say they drown in themselves in these words. But what's the value of these words? They come in here and castigate the PLP. They say for the Mortgage Corporation. But yet, we look at what they do. And I can come back to some more stuff, you know. Instead of taking the lazy shortcut, and that's what I call it, which seems to be the root of this administration. Instead of taking the lazy shortcut, which is to make these political points, in my view, they should have made an intelligent analysis.
Honorable members.
Thank you, Speaker. Instead of taking the lazy shortcut that we heard in here, which is saying people ain't paying and this and it's the PLP and it's the PLP and thank God the FNM here. Instead of taking that lazy shortcut, I would have thought that the time has come to give some intelligent analysis to what is happening at the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, to look at the whole framework, the whole construct of the Mortgage Corporation. The member for Elizabeth, you know, as I said, he said that it was the PLP looking out for their people that got us here, okay? Then he himself was the chairman of the corporation. Did he mention that? He's chairman, right there, and he knows better, or I don't know, maybe he knows what he going, which I need to know what was happening, and he was there. He got insight into the practices, look like, Speaker. He knows better. He didn't disclose it. Former chairman of the BMC.
He didn't disclose that.
And you know, actually, he should have declared his interest because he didn't tell us how much we're defaulting when he was chairman.
Yeah, he didn't tell us that.
But Mr. Speaker, he knows better, and he does a disservice to the many professionals at the corporation, who I want to take this opportunity, I don't know if the member did, to commend them, because they are long-standing and they've really kept the body going, and they're good people. Yeah. And I think that while the member may think he's making political attacks, he may actually unintentionally be going a stage below the policymakers and sending a signal of ingratitude to people who've worked so hard in the system. So, Speaker, and you know, what I thought would have been useful if we didn't have the politics, it would have been good for someone to commend and thank on that side, the prior administration, even though the member for Marathon, he threw those dates in. We appreciate those dates. 2015, 2016, of when this whole decision was made to acquire this building, which this administration has decided to carry through. They threw out the window a lot of stuff, but they stuck with this one, you know. But I want to thank the member for Marathon because you gave us some good insight into those. Oh, thank you, thank you. And so, Mr. Speaker, in my view, if we were going to have an intelligent conversation, I thought it would have begun by thanking the former administration for bringing us here. Secondly, it would have been to commend the staff of there and to have an analysis of the regime that governs mortgages in this country, Speaker. And in reviewing or looking at the regime or the wider issues, it is my view, or the macro issue, that Marathon and Elizabeth, who've so far spoken on this, should have been alluding to the wider picture of what is happening in this economy. This economy. The high levels of foreclosures that we have seen over the years after 2008 with the commercial banks. And I recall their strident criticism of the last administration's attempt at mortgage relief and their constant criticism of how we fail, you fail, you fail, you try, but you fail. Okay, this is what they said. But we tried. We tried. But having taken office, they haven't done anything.
Elizabeth said that?
They haven't done anything. No, I'm looking at Elizabeth, but it ain't him. No, the member for Kalani was a specialist at that. So, Mr. Speaker, no, we haven't heard anything. You might want to do it as you make it up as you go along, but we ain't hear nothing about it, Mr. Speaker. We don't want you to make it up as you go along. You come to governance, you have to have a plan, Mr. Speaker. But you criticize mortgage relief, and you brought nothing. But what you've done instead, though, what we've seen instead is the same people who who criticized us for trying to save homes. What we've seen of this administration is the graphic images of people thrown on the sidewalk and locked out of their homes. That's what we've seen. This is the new mortgage relief. Hit the sidewalk. We heard no analysis. We should have seen if people are facing difficulties. I don't know what the issues are. We've heard 4 cases from the member for Marathon, and there may be more. But if there are issues, structural issues that are impacting people, which I suspect is part of the problem, what is the solution to that? Bearing in mind now, the Mortgage Corporation was formed initially to provide housing, and I can talk about it later, for ordinary Bahamians. And so we thought there's no mortgage relief. Their mortgage relief solution is put you on the sidewalk. Put you on the sidewalk. And we've seen or heard no analysis of the predatory lending that is taking place in this country because it's part of the picture. We know that. We know the crisis. And I heard the member for Elizabeth talking about America. America is a different scenario. It has no relevance to the reality of the Bahamian people. And we know that there is an issue of predatory lending in this country. And people are going home with dollars and cents, couple dollars at the end of the day because of the way they've extended themselves because of predatory lending in this country. That's the issue I would have wanted to heard about, not what happened in America with their housing thing. What is happening in the Bahamas and how vulnerable particularly public servants are to this type of policy or this type of happening in our country. And this is having an effect, an ability of the people to meet their obligations. And then we saw the central bank report. I don't have it here, but I've spoken about it over and over in here, where it says at least almost 50% of people in this country, working people, cannot pay their weekly or monthly expenses from their wage. So we have a crisis that's macro in this country. And to come here and single out people in the Mortgage Corporation, and maybe the 4 cases, the 4 cases are quite compelling. But if there is an issue that has a broader, deeper effect, we should be looking at that. And we've had no discussion about that. All we hear about was the PLP, and these people who the PLP put there, I think that's what suggests. That's another thing. Are we saying all these people who they've put out are PLPs? Are we now injecting politics into who these persons? We saw the images on TV. One woman said, "All I need." How she put it? Only God can help me now. Only God. She didn't say Philip Davis. Only God can help her now. And so, we would have expected to have an understanding because of the role the Mortgage Corporation has played in our country. We would have expected the government to have a deeper analysis of the dilemma, but we've not seen that. So in light of what the macro situation that is being faced in our country, and it's real, we should have been hearing some enlightening policy from this administration. But they only speak one language. They're not bilingual. PLP, no good. FNM, good. And they're also limited vocabulary. Limited vocabulary. And they like that. The member for Seabury says good for a headline. Yeah, but the headline though was people put on the sidewalks and it wasn't funny. So Speaker, when it is analyzed, this administration truly has only introduced a few things, into the political landscape. And much of it has not been very impressive. We think of the Grand Lucayan deal I've just spoken of. So we don't need them to tell us about fiscal prudence and all these things. It's been described as a bad deal. You did not negotiate well on behalf of the Bahamian people. The whole brain wasn't in place, look like. Speaker. The Oban debacle. The backtracking and flip-flopping. The mismanagement of our economy, which is painfully unfolding before our very eyes. The state of our public health care system. The BPL debacle. And the absolute non-movement on energy reform. And on and on and on and on and on and on and on. Speaker, what I'd hoped to hear, how much time I have? Let me get this quote. What's that quote?
I can't remember.
7 minutes? What's that quote? Tell me that quote again. Never before in my whole life have I seen so few people, what's the word? Mess up so many things in such a short period of time. Oh man.
Say that again.
I got 7 minutes. I can't repeat that. Okay, but I know I'm wondering whether the member constrained his own credibility when he referred to that. So what I'd hoped to hear, Mr. Speaker, was a new look at the purview of the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, which has a very limited remit in terms as a lending institution. For example, you're not able to go there and obtain refinancing for homeowners. Homeowners can't go and get refinancing for example, for renovation of their homes, which is something that's fairly normal in home ownership. But because they have a limited remit, they're not able to do that. So as a consequence, many viable borrowers leave the corporation to seek refinancing at commercial banks. So they end up losing what is in effect a good client base because of what is in effect the one-dimensional remit of the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation. Both members, Marathon and Elizabeth, should have been able to allude to the philosophical underpinning of the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, which was through lower interest rates to make available to ordinary Bahamians a fundamental human right, which is access to housing. That's the basis of it. It ain't got nothing to do with the PLP. Well, the PLP introduced it, so it has a lot to do with it in that regard. But it has nothing to do with the PLP or the FNM or who the people vote for, who they ain't vote for. That was the original philosophical movement for the creation of this in 1981. And, Mr. Speaker, what we should have heard was, as I said, a deeper analysis, understanding the role of the mortgage corporation. It's not a commercial bank like the other banks. It has a different function in our national life, and there ought to have been some analysis of that. And then we would have had a greater appreciation of what is happening at that corporation. But, there's been so much politics injected into it, particularly by Elizabeth. Truth be told, and I believe this is true, the first executive chairman was Ruth Miller, wasn't it? Ruth Miller? Ruth Miller, under the PLP administration, which formed the corporation to meet this fundamental human right for ordinary Bahamians. But if my memory serves me correctly, the first politicization, if you can use that word, of the administrative leadership came under the FNM. Yes, 92, I think it was someone, Mr. King, who was a candidate for the Free National Movement. That's where the shift came. I'm also told that up to that point, the corporation was doing well, profitable, described as being profitable. So we don't need the Free National Movement government to come in here and talk about who's political and who ain't political, because we understand your role in making it political in the first instance. So, Mr. Speaker, it's a little off the wall, so to speak, for the members opposite to come here and speak to the politicization of the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation. I believe up until that time, the corporation was a profitable entity and has over the years assisted many Bahamians, and in particular, working class Bahamians attaining housing in this country, Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I summarize by saying that it was my hope that we would have had a more mature, deeper analysis of the role of the BMC in our country, the understanding of issues that people may face as consumers or as mortgagees in the system, understanding the larger economic challenge that people are facing in this country, and bringing an analysis that helps us to understand better. And then what is the role going forward for the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation? Are you just going to be a regular bank, and like the other banks, the Canadian banks, or are you going to connect to that philosophical mandate to assure housing for Bahamians? And on the issue of defaulting mortgages, I just want to say, that in the last several years, we saw many defaulting mortgages in this country from the commercial banks. But do we say that those people are PLP? That some politician approved their loans, and as a result, they whatever. I mean, what this type of approach is not mature, and it does not advance the national dialogue. You want me to repeat it for you? Okay. In the last several years, there have been many defaulting mortgages. People have not been able to meet their obligations, and they've lost their homes. We've seen this now with the Mortgage Corporation. So I'm saying, why are they PLP in the Mortgage Corporation? Why haven't we analyzed the issues that may be facing homeowners?
Honorable Member, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Marathon.
I love the member from Angiston. Let me just say that first. But I know she's given the hyperbole. That's misleading. When I made my presentation, certainly, I never said anything about the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation effecting PLP.
Not you. No, I didn't say that. Yes,
well, the member for Elizabeth is more than capable in conducting his own defense, and I'm even more so. I am saying, right? I'm saying, let's just be clear here. I outlined the process of what happened. I outlined the process. I stated very clearly that notices were given in pursuance to the Consumer Protection Act 2017. The individuals had ample notice, sometimes years' notice. So this whole thing about not having sufficient time is simply untrue. Not only that, you're talking about individuals, some cases between 2, 5, 10, 15 years not making a repayment. See, Mr. Speaker, that is a kind of passive victimization of people who are more than willing to, who are out there. There are Bahamians out there who qualify and will pay if given the chance. So all I'm saying, that wasn't a political exercise. That is an exercise by which the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation cannot sustain itself. I outlined its functions. I said this to the record, just like the member for Angiston mentioned that she didn't have any discussion on the philosophy. I outlined it just like all other lending institutions on page 8. The BMC focuses on attracting and maintaining new mortgage loans. The ability to maintain. See, we are allowed to have differences of opinion. Okay. You mentioned that. So all I'm pointing out here is that is not a political exercise. That is a function of you not paying your mortgage for 2, 5, 10, 15 years, and the court process is then invoked. That's all I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, and clearing that up.
Thank you, Honorable.
And I never said anything about PLPs. No. I don't operate that way.
Oh? Mr. Speaker, the point I was making...
Recognize the Honorable Member for Angiston.
Thank you, Speaker. The point, I think the member, and I'm a bit disappointed because I know he used to be a good PLP. He missed the point. I remember seeing him in South Beach. South Beach.
That's a good comeback.
Speaker, the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation was not just to be another lending institution. I mean, that is not why it was formed. But I was not really referring to the member for Marathon, who basically set out the facts. I would have hoped, though, that he would have brought a deeper analysis to it, because it may be that people at the Mortgage Corporation, I heard the cases, I don't know what the facts are, you gave 4 cases, but I'm sure there are much more than 4 cases. I would have hoped that we would have had a deeper analysis as to why so many people are not being able to meet their obligations and whether the government is able to bring relief, as we sought to bring mortgage relief. Still a mortgage, you know, even though it's a mortgage corporation, whether they sought to do so. But Mr. Speaker, I want to again commend the prior leadership of the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, which was Ken Dorsett and Alex Storr for their leadership, which led us now to acquire this building, which is the fundamental basis on which we are operating from. And so, Mr. Speaker, I trust that when we move beyond this, Mr. Speaker, that we will, and this is my bottom line really, that we will hear articulated either from this administration or the one that succeeds them, hopefully sooner rather than later, one that is able to construct a housing policy that assures access to housing for ordinary Bahamians, one that will bring, I think the former this administration, when in opposition, promised amendments to the Rent Act. We've not seen that or heard about it. That will look to the issue of housing and the challenges and the dilemma that many Bahamians face in the issue of housing in this country, not being able to access housing. It's a real issue. And I trust that this will become a fundamental tenet of governance of the next administration, the Progressive Liberal Party, which we believe will take office and will bring a focus to this issue. Speaker, I hear them laughing, you know, but you know the old people say, he who laughs last, laughs best. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable members. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Garden Hills. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, this is a good place for us. As a matter of fact, it's after 1, so I do move that the House suspends until 3 p.m.
Second that, Mr. Speaker.
It has been moved and seconded that the business of this House do suspend until 3 p.m. this afternoon. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The business of this House stands suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon.